And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 14th episode of a new show called The Hoosier Sound. I am your host, Noah Freeman, and I am delighted to present you with this new podcast. Our show has one main goal: to give you our perspective of IU sports from the point of view as a student or young adult. In addition, we will also give our view on hot takes from around the world of sports. We will be going live every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m. But if you miss us live, you can also subscribe to our various networks so you can listen on your own time. We are now on iTunes or Apple Podcast, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and our live stream will be posted to our YouTube page after each recording. All you got to do is search for The Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts and just hit subscribe. It's simple, easy, and it would mean a lot to us if you guys just hit that subscribe button for us. Social media is also big for us, and we post updates for you guys in Facebook and Twitter. Make sure you give us a like and a follow, as well as subscribe in our YouTube account. All of the information is in the description below. You can also check out our website, thehoosiersound.wordpress.com, to find all of our information in one place. All right, Hoosier Nation, it's time for some sports talk. Before we get into the meat of this episode, I just want to quickly wrap up our thoughts on the Iowa game. So I'm going to give you a few numbers that I thought were key to this Indiana victory last night over Iowa. IU made more free throws than Iowa had shot. So IU made 15 free throws to where Iowa just shot only 9. Obviously, that's our free throw percentage was very poor. A lot of that is largely contributed to Duran, who went 5 of 11. He's struggling this year, shooting only 45.2% on the season, and that air ball he shot last night, that was just a little interesting. We'll put it that way. But he shot 75% last year, so he's got it in him. So it's pretty clearly mental in his mindset with these free throws, because he can do it. He's just missing obviously a lot more than he usually does. But it's good that we're getting to the line a lot more than last year. And now we just obviously have to make all of these free throws. Juwan recorded his second double-double of the season with 15 points and 10 rebounds. Juwan's playing very consistent and putting up all-around numbers that are basically becoming all Big Ten numbers, if not even a higher caliber standard. Duran, back to Duran. He had 0 fouls for the second time this season. The other time was against Howard. So take what you will against that. For only the second time in his collegiate career, Duran has 0 fouls when he played over 15 minutes in a game. Basically, that just weeds out last year when he was a freshman and he was playing behind Thomas Bryant and also playing not that much, because he has had games where he had 0 fouls. But if he's not playing 5-10 minutes, then that's not as significant as where he's playing 20-30 minutes. But let's move on to Colin. Colin's minutes are continuing to climb, and it's showing on how IU is playing when he's available. Iowa and Michigan, against Iowa and Michigan, he put up 20 minutes in both games. Iowa, he had his best game of the season, scoring 13 points and putting up the most shots he has in a game. Let's move over to Rob. He was 1 for 6 from 3, except a lot of those shots were wide open. So it begs the question, is he really losing some of his three-point touch? I'm not sure. But really his three-point numbers have not gotten as good as it usually is for him, and he's just finding but the good news is he's finding more ways to score from the field instead of using those three-point shots, which he more or less really leaned on the past couple of years. Again, this was a tale of two halves, except this time it was in the turnover category. First half, we had 7 turnovers. It was kind of weird because we outscored Iowa by 14, 15 points in the first half, and then we actually was outscored by Iowa in the second half by 2, where we only had 3 turnovers. But it's at least right now a common theme for this Hoosier team. Most games that we are having a tale of two halves, one half being better than the other. And in this game, it was basically turnovers. When the past couple of games, we've also had turnovers where one half's been really good, one half's been really bad, kind of like the Duke game. So at least one of these halves, we're doing well with these turnovers, and then we just got to keep them down, and we can try and get under that 10 turnover limit per game, except that's in itself just a much better stat than it has been the past few years anyway. Lastly, runs. Hoosier team has not gone on a lot of runs this season, except Iowa. We actually had 2 last night. The first half, at the end of the half, we went on a 17-1 run. And then the second half, before we basically kind of just played it safe, put in the subs and everything, we wanted an 18-0 run just to kind of put Iowa out and just to make sure that they weren't going to come back in the game. And lastly, basically just with this IU team, if you take out the Michigan game, this team is still constantly improving every single game. Obviously, Michigan, we took a huge step back, and we can see how obviously there's a lot of moving parts and how we have to fix some things, but this team is getting there and it's getting better, and we just got to trust Archie Miller. So what happened 2 nights ago in the realm of IU basketball? This past Sunday, somewhere around the evening, we were all given notice that Curtis Jones is leaving the IU basketball team and transferring at the end of the semester. This is what Archie Miller said about his departure. Quote, "We appreciate Curtis's contributions and wish him nothing but the best in the future." And then Curtis said this about his leaving, quote, "I am grateful to have had the opportunity to be a part of the IU basketball program and look forward to finding a new situation where I can achieve the goals I have as a basketball player and as a student." Curtis was averaging 11.4 minutes per game this year, 3 rebounds, 3 points per game. 1 rebound, half an assist, and shooting 27% from the field and only 22% from 3. He clocked in only about 10 minutes in the last 3 games, where he sat out during the entire game against Duke. Out of 12 people who have logged real minutes, Curtis is 3rd to last, or 9th on the team, which is just above Zach and Clifton. So that's basically counting all of the guys who have logged real minutes up until last night. So taking out Tim Priller, Jager, all of those players that haven't actually come into the game yet. But if you take out the first game against Indiana State, where he played the most he has the whole season and shot much better than the rest of the season so far, he only averages 8.4 minutes a game and 1.7 points per game. So obviously he's regressing even to what he had last year. It's somewhat of a shock with the timing and wanting to transfer at the end of the semester, because pretty sure he has to sit out a year now and loses an entire calendar year. That means he's only going to have half a season, a season and a half left of his college basketball career. So it's really surprising. Basically, who's giving the advice to him to transfer now and not wait to do it later in the season with a lot of these transfers, because transferring as an undergrad is a very tricky thing, and coming back when you can play and when you cannot play is very different, because obviously they don't want teams to just have, say, Miles Bridges go over to Duke and then just win a championship right in the middle of the year, so they can stop kind of these super teams and stuff like that. But like I said, the timing was a little bit of a shock, I think, but not necessarily the transfer in itself. I just read how his minutes had been regressing and how his play had been regressing a lot since last year. And this was kind of a make or break year for him. And I guess it's kind of more of the break side than what we had hoped. But the timing, like I said, middle of the year, he also had to have been thinking about this since before the season started, because this isn't a game or a decision where you make it within 3 games between Duke, Michigan, and all that stuff. It's not a decision that you make this quickly, especially leaving a top tier program when you were a top 100 recruit, where he had 16 different schools offer him scholarships, including schools like Kentucky, Kansas, Louisville. All of those powerhouse teams had offered him a scholarship. I think that his playing time was decreasing. He didn't think he'd be able to earn it back, basically. I also think the emergence of Al Durham plays a big role. Now, Al obviously has not had a typical game the past couple of games where he has had at the beginning of the year not been doing as well as he's had in the first few games, especially where he went on that 130 minute streak without giving up a turnover. But still, that kind of pushes him down the roll of guards, where there are now 4 guards that were in front of him before he would actually start getting some of the minutes. It's kind of sad he couldn't stick it out to see if he could really push himself to earn the playing time. But that being said, it does seem like a mutual breakup and that it was best for both parties. There are a lot of things that we won't ever know, but it just seems like these things weren't working out in his eyes, and he just kind of wanted to play some more basketball instead of sitting on the bench when he probably aspires to be in the NBA. But let's look at his future, because obviously we don't want to just push him aside and just not follow him later on. So where possibly could he land? A big potential landing spot is UVA. He grew up in Richmond, Virginia, which is only basically an hour from the campus of UVA in Charlottesville, and it's pretty much not much debate of the best basketball program in Virginia. So he probably knows them pretty well. UVA and Curtis also had somewhat of a mutual interest during his recruiting time period in the first place before he ended up picking IU. They weren't on his list. UVA was not on his list of Final Four teams, which included IU, obviously, Oklahoma State, Georgetown, and Cal. IU, Oklahoma State, and Georgetown were basically the main contenders, kind of like with Romeo, where it's just us, Vanderbilt, and Kansas that are now there. Those were kind of the 3 schools for Curtis that were coming into his recruiting. But UVA has 2 open scholarship spots right now for the 2017-18 season. So they only have 11 scholarships players on their team right now, and they're low on guards. Next year, they only have 2 total guards. So really, they're going to need some of that playing, and obviously he'd be able to spark some of those explosive pushes that he actually gives, because he's a very explosive player when he wants to be. But there's also some reason to be cautious about him going to UVA if you're going to keep following him, because it's still a major program and he would have to fight for minutes. It's the same situation as IU. And what kind of defense did you think that UVA and Tony Bennett runs over there in Charlottesville? That's right. It's the pack line defense, the exact same defense scheme that Archie runs and that Curtis struggles with, basically. He's never been great at defense. That's been his arguably his most questionable feature of his play. And that's going to be the questionable thing right now for him going on to the transfer market. But after IU had to kick a player off the team right before the season started, they do have the open spots and could use some offense to go along with that incredible defense. Also, a look into the future, how good this defensive scheme can be for the Hoosiers. If you see UVA, which is a mid-ish level school, mid-ish to top level school, to become consistently good, and not only consistently making the tournament, but they're consistently in the top, the AP top 25 as well, with not getting some of these top 10 recruits or even sometimes top 50 recruits, and they're still, Tony Bennett still getting them into the top 25 consistently, sometimes even in the top 5. That's pretty cool. And obviously Virginia is known for their defense and how good they are, and that's how they win games. Just give Archie time. He's getting there. But where else could Curtis land? Georgetown. He obviously he could go back there. They've got 1 open scholarship spot, and will Curtis want to kind of go back home, since it's kind of a couple hours up north from where he grew up, and then play for the new coach in Patrick Ewing? I would. Obviously, it's Patrick Ewing. Oklahoma State, just going back to his top 4 schools, they're all booked up. Not sure how he'd be able to get over there, so that's probably not the best spots. And I'm pretty sure Cal has some spots that are open, but it didn't seem like he was very interested. But again, he won't be able to play right away in any of these schools he's going to, so it's going to be interesting to see where he moves and what kind of schools will actually start to try and look at him. But there's a big question and some food for thought. Will this affect our relationship with Huntington Prep? That's where Curtis went to high school. Obviously, Crean loved them, and we now have a whole recruiting structure here with Archie, completely new. But if there's a player he liked, I doubt he would break ties with the school, even if IU has been good to their players. Huntington Prep has been a great place that Crean and IU has looked at over the past years. Thomas Bryant went to Huntington, and I don't know. I would hope that doesn't completely break our ties to the school. Obviously, it's not as much the school as it is the coaches' connections, but obviously IU has done very well with the players coming from Huntington to IU, so that's just some food for thought. And some other this is a big school too. The Huntington Prep is a big school that brings out major players. They had Andrew Wiggins and Miles Bridges both went to that school, so it's a really good school. But it does open up one more scholarship spot for IU recruiting, which we can get into later. That's a whole nother topic in itself. So let's move on to our now new weekly segment of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to start with the good. Men's soccer. They made it to the NCAA tournament with an NCAA record of their 19th College Cup. Basically, their 19th College Cup, making it to that Final Four, which is now a new NCAA record. They are the highest ranked team left after number 1 Wake Forest just lost 2-0. They play number 3 UNC this Friday, December 8th at 8:45 in Philadelphia. So last week was that last game in Bloomington, and now they travel to Philadelphia. If they win, it's either number 9 Stanford or number 5 Akron, whoever wins that game, and they would play on this Sunday, so the 10th at 1 p.m. So keep following them, guys. They're right there. They're in the Final Four. If this was basketball, obviously everyone would be following it. They're an incredible team. Make sure you watch them this weekend because this is very, very big for Indiana itself. And another good, I wanted to add just another good thing that I didn't have before last night game. Deron Davis having 0 fouls, like I mentioned before. That's an incredible thing, especially against a Big Ten school. Obviously, not a great Big Ten school, kind of second half of the Big Ten, but that's still great, especially for it basically being fouls being his only, or at least his biggest limiting factor in most of his games. But let's go to the bad. And Curtis Jones, even if it's mutual, it's not the best situation that another player after Grant Galen is leaving Archie's system. Obviously, they don't have to get along. Archie's been doing a great job not having people or continuing to keep people on the team and all that, but it's still not the best situation that we might have someone, especially a top 100 recruit player, leaving the team. And let's get to the bad, the ugly. Sorry, we just did the bad. LeVar Ball. If you guys haven't been following LeVar and LiAngelo, LeVar just informed the media yesterday that he'll be taking out his son, LiAngelo Ball, from UCLA. Not just in basketball, but from his school after his arrest in China for stealing at 3 stores. So if you guys haven't followed that, LiAngelo and a few other UCLA players, basically while they were in UCLA, they stole from a few stores in China while they were there playing some games. They were arrested. Even Donald Trump intervened to try and get them back over to the States, but they were suspended indefinitely, and now LeVar has pulled him from not only basketball at UCLA, but the school. Sadly, we all know LeVar, so there will probably no doubt be some power play that LeVar will try and swing. But for now, at least it's an ugly for them, and it's about time. Next up, we haven't talked about the NFL in a while, and I just wanted to touch base with a pretty interesting season. Not too in depth, because I know we're going to have basically a show or two that's very NFL heavy, especially as we start winding up the season right before the playoffs. Get a couple guests in here and stuff like that. But I want to start out with the biggest surprise for me this year, and it's going to be the NFC dominance. This was supposed to be a year of divisions like the AFC West with Denver, Oakland, Kansas City. You couple that with teams like the Patriots and the Steelers, and this was supposed to be an incredibly strong AFC conference this year, and it really hasn't turned out like that. And you look over at the NFC, a lot of these teams were not supposed to be that good on paper. Basically, they did not have a great season last year, but the emergence of the Eagles, Vikings, Saints, and Rams has been honestly incredible, and really cool to see some of those programs turn around really quickly. Through 12 games last year, the Eagles last year in 12 games, they were 5-7, compared to this year where they are 10-12, or 10 and 10, 10-12. They're 10-2 now, basically. So 5-7 to 10-2 through 12 games. Vikings last year they were 6-6. This year they're 10-2 now. They've always been pretty good, honestly. They just had their QB struggles with Teddy Bridgewater and everything last year, but now they technically have their third string quarterback in Case Keenum playing, and he's playing absolutely lights out, which is really cool to see someone get a chance like that and making the most of it. Saints 5-7 again last year through 12 games, and then this year they're 9-3. Rams last year they were even worse at 4-8, and a team that also was on in the middle of losing their last 7 games of the season. They're now 9-3, which is incredible. It's really amazing to see what happens when a new coach can do well and get a QB to play well, with Jared Goff especially having such an awful season last year, and now he's having just an incredible season. And if he was a true rookie, he would honestly be in the conversation for rookie of the year. But let's move on. I'm going to steal this segment from another show that I see that it's a pretty cool segment, and I want to get into it, and it's going to be called What the Heck Moments. So in the NFL this past weekend, so basically stuff that you basically kind of just question, and you don't know why some of that had to happen. You're just kind of, what the heck? So let's start with Robert Gronkowski. Over the weekend when the Patriots played the Bills, there was a rookie cornerback covering Gronkowski on a play from the Bills, and during the play, he was grabbing and pulling on Gronk, definitely 5 yards past, as he was trying to run a route, and there was no call, so Gronkowski was getting very frustrated. Brady was intercepted as he was trying to go to Gronkowski, and he fell on the ground basically near the sideline after intercepting the ball, because he just laid out for the ball and caught it, and then just fell to the ground. The play had been over. The teammates were coming to congratulate him and all that stuff. He was just on the ground, kind of sprawled out on the ground, and Gronkowski comes over and literally just falls on him and body slams him as he was on the ground. And you think what was going through his head. I haven't seen that kind of dirty play in a long time. You see big hits and dirty hits that happen, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But that was a huge dirty play, and I have no idea why he was doing that. Next, the Giants. There's a lot of what the heck going on with the Giants. First, the benching of Eli, having someone two-time Super Bowl champion started 213 consecutive games, and you bench him just because your team's doing bad. He's got a terrible offensive line. He's got no running back. He's got 0 receivers after all of the injuries, and Eli Manning is not the problem on the Giants. After benching him, they basically, after this weekend, they're like, oh, we're going to restart you. So they basically got rid of his incredible starting streak where he doesn't get injured. He doesn't get suspended. He's a consistent player for the most part. And then we get into yesterday where they fire Ben McAdoo, their head coach, which was the first time in 40 years where the Giants had a coaching change during the season, and they fired their GM as well. The Giants are not doing well, to put it lightly, and basically they need someone to come in and completely revitalize the program. Miami and Bronco, the Denver Broncos. Miami absolutely killed the Broncos over the past weekend, 35-9, which basically, this is just shocking because Denver went from such a powerhouse team with such a good defense, obviously losing Peyton Manning hurt, but they were still a good team, to losing to a very bad, a a pretty bad team with Miami this year, and they got outscored by 26 points. Not sure what's going on in Denver, but that's basically caused a lot of cause for concern. Then let's get to Monday Night Football. Last night, the Steelers and the Bengals played a very hard fought, to say the least, game with, and very tough nosed type of, if you can put it that way, game. Penalties. There were, between both teams, there were 20 plays that were penalized that the refs threw flags on. The Bengals, they had 13 penalties for a franchise record of 173 penalty yards. They had 173 penalty yards. What the heck? Bengals, that's awful. Obviously, there were some calls that you could question, but it doesn't matter. They had 173 penalty yards. That just goes to show some of the players on the Bengals and how undisciplined they are. We'll get into injuries last night. So we had Antonio Brown, who had an ailing toe and really was questionable up until a kickoff, where he's got an injured toe, yet he still caught 8 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown where he got absolutely drilled in the head. That's unstoppable. That's incredible. But we get into, obviously, Ryan Shazier, which is a very tough topic, and I'm not going to get into it very much, where Ryan Shazier was tackling someone. His head was down. Once he hit the ground, his bottom half of his body went limp. He pointed to his back, asked for trainers to come over, and had to be carted off. And this is a guy who will warm up in 0-degree weather without a shirt to show how tough he is. And that's just something scary. Now, there is good news. They're thinking that it's positive, but there's no statement that's been sent out at this time. But in addition to that, there was also Joe Mixon with a concussion, and Burfict, who had an injury question mark, where he went off the field 3 times and came back in. So that's in itself a little questionable, and kind of what the heck that all of these trainers and doctors were letting him come back in after getting injured so many times. But there were a lot of injuries last night, which was really sad. And then John Gruden, my goodness, one of the announcers, the color announcer last night, how one-sided and how poor his analysis was last night. First, he was defending how the dirty Vontaze Burfict, a guy who will, between plays, just go over and try and hit someone, will hit people with the crown of his helmet, and there's no defending Vontaze Burfict in any situation. And then he defends him basically last night on air, and I just don't know what he was thinking. Next, he was talking about a lot of bad penalty calls, basically for the cameras to kind of show how clear the penalties were multiple times on both sides. He was just kind of then next he was just talking about letting them play. He was just, oh, guy, come on, refs. And you don't want, with fans aren't asking to see the refs coming to see the refs throw the flags. Just let the boys play. And then he was backtracking when some of these really big hits happened, and he was just like, oh, there's no place for that. There was a lot of mixed signals coming from him, and he was just very all over the place and could not get a real comprehensive statement out, it seemed like, all night. But that about wraps it up for our 14th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and please feel free to add suggestions in the comments section or contact us through our website. Reminder to follow us on Twitter at the Hoosier Sound, like our Facebook page, as well as subscribe to us on YouTube. If you enjoy the show, these are vital for receiving updates about our show. But you can also subscribe on either Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, or Stitcher, and leave us a review. All the links are in the description below. Visit us at our website at thehoosiersound.wordpress.com to find out all of our information regarding our podcast, and stay tuned for updates through social media. As always, send us your questions as the audience, so be sure to comment, chat, or send us a message and we'll on the questions, and we'll see if we can get it on next show. Lastly, if you enjoyed our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links, and it really helps so we can grow this podcast. But thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.